Welcome to our lesson on diffusion. Diffusion is one of the processes by which particles move from one place to another and a way that substances move into and out of cells. The key questions for today are: what is diffusion? Where does diffusion occur? What factors affect the rate of diffusion? Why is diffusion needed in the body? How are parts of organisms adapted for diffusion? Key words that you need to know are passive, semi-permeable membrane, concentration gradient, surface area, exchange. Put simply, diffusion is the spreading out of a substance in solution or gas particles. Diffusion is one of the processes by which substances move across semi-permeable membranes to enter and exit cells. It is a passive process, meaning that it doesn't require any energy. Diffusion is when there is a net movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So, where there are lots to where there are fewer. Task: copy the diagrams and add arrows to show the net movement of the substances. The net movement of the particles will be from the side with more particles to the side with less particles. Net movement means the overall movement of the particles, taking into account the motion in both directions. This will always be from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration. The rate of diffusion can be increased in several different ways, the first being increasing the concentration gradient. This means there would be a larger difference in the number of particles each side of the membrane and therefore faster diffusion. Extension: which of the diagrams above shows the largest concentration gradient? The last picture shows the largest concentration gradient. Another factor that affects the rate of diffusion is the surface area of the membrane. The larger the surface of the membrane, the faster diffusion will be. The temperature also affects the rate of diffusion, as particles at a higher temperature have more kinetic energy, so move around quicker. Therefore, the hotter a substance, the faster diffusion will take place. Diffusion takes place in many places in the body, through the alveoli in lungs where gas exchange takes place, in the small intestines where food molecules are absorbed into the bloodstream, in the kidneys where waste products such as urea are removed from the blood, through the cell membranes of all cells to allow substances in and out. These surfaces and organ systems are adapted for effective exchange of materials. They all have a good blood supply to maintain a concentration gradient, a folded surface to increase the surface area, and a thin membrane for a short diffusion pathway. This means that the particles don't have too far to travel through the membrane. There may also be other features, such as moisture or fluid produced to allow the substances to dissolve and therefore diffuse more easily. Task: look at the diagram below of an alveolus in the lungs. Describe and explain how it is adapted for diffusion of oxygen into the blood. The alveolus has a large surface area to increase the rate of diffusion. It also has a very thin membrane, as does the capillary. This means there is a very short diffusion pathway. The good blood supply means that as oxygen is diffused into the blood, it is moved away from the alveolus. This maintains the concentration gradient so that diffusion of oxygen into the blood happens at a fast rate. There is also fluid produced in the alveolus that the oxygen will dissolve in. This also increases the rate of diffusion as the oxygen molecules will diffuse through the membrane more easily. Diffusion also occurs in plants, with some minerals in the soil diffusing into the root hair cells. These cells have a large surface area, and the minerals are moved away from the roots and up the stem of the plant quickly to maintain the concentration gradient. Gases must also diffuse into and out of the leaf through small holes called stomata. The cells in the leaf are arranged to have air spaces to allow gases to diffuse through the leaf. It is important for large multicellular organisms to have these adaptations so that sufficient substances can be exchanged to maintain the health of the organism. Single-celled organisms do not need these exchange surfaces and organ systems, as their surface area is large compared to their volume, so sufficient substances can diffuse through the cell membrane. This measurement that compares volume to surface area is expressed as the surface area to volume ratio. Single-celled organisms have a large surface area to volume ratio. Task: the average number of alveoli in each human lung is 280 million. The average surface area of 1 million alveoli is 0.25 meters squared. Calculate the total surface area of the human lung. The answer, 70 meters squared. Extension. An athlete trains to run a marathon. The surface area of each of the athlete's lungs has increased to 80 meters squared. Give one way in which this increase will help the athlete. This will help the athlete to take in more oxygen to the blood to move the muscles for respiration, which will help him to run for longer. The surface area to volume ratio is calculated by first finding the surface area. This can be done by finding the area of each surface and adding them all together. You will then need to find the volume. For a regular shape, this is length times width times height. You then express the terms as a ratio and cancel down to the simplest form. For a single number value, divide the surface area by the volume. Task: complete this AQA exam question. The surface area to volume ratio of a cube is 6:1. A. Calculate the total surface area of cube 2 that has sides of length 2 centimetres. B. Calculate the volume of cube 2. C. Calculate the surface area to volume ratio of cube 2. Use the equation surface area to volume ratio is equal to surface area over volume.